Humans are holobiont. What that means is that there are a collection of entities that make up our self. And I'm not just talking about our body, but our entire consciousness, our entire perception of life is dependent on multiple organisms. According to this paper, The Brain, Gut, and Consciousness, Microbiology of Our Mind, there's actually 10 times more non-human entities than there are number of human nucleated cells. This article by redefine explores into our consciousness and how it is intertwined with the microbiome, most of which is residing in our gut. Now, there is bi-directional communication between our brain and our body, primarily our heart and our gut, which means that it's not just our brain sending signals down into this organism, but there's actually signals coming up to the brain from the gut, from the heart, that is signaling the brain how to think, how to feel, how to perceive. And this article does a wonderful job explaining, laying out, and even posing questions such as, is consciousness experienced differently dependent on the proportions of bacteria and their behaviors? We must first reject the already outdated idea that we as biological entities are unitary individuals. What constitutes us as biological organisms is actually not just our body mass in the sense of organs, muscles, bones, etc., but also the microorganisms living in symbiosis with our body. In fact, our bodies contain on average 3.8 to 10 to the 13th bacteria, which is 10 times more than the number of human nucleated cells, which is about 0.2 kilograms of our body mass, which is about 4.44 pounds of our body mass. Now, there's, according to the paper or the research that you're looking at, I'm just going to go off of, if you Google it right now, you're going to get a number around 100 billion neurons in the head brain, as compared to around 500 million neurons in the gut brain. A lot of us don't realize that there's a brain in our gut. There's actually neurons there, just like there's neurons in our head. What does that mean? It means that it's thinking, okay? And what is 500 million compared to 100 billion? It's about 0.5%, okay? So if you just think about the power of our head brain, it's very, very powerful. If you just took a little portion of it, 0.5%, that actually is extremely powerful compared to the whole thing. So 0.5% of the neurons in our body are coming from the gut. And there's about 40,000 neurons in the heart. And then there's a whole bunch of nerve endings throughout the fascia in the body. And that's a whole other conversation that I won't get into today about, is the fascia of the body also thinking? It's definitely reacting, right? If you stub your toe on a sidewalk and instead of just falling, your body reacts. It does have an intelligence there, but we're talking primarily about the gut when we're looking into this paper. So according to this, a holobiont is an entity that is composed of multiple entities. And in order for something to be holobiont, it actually has to share functionality with these entities. Otherwise, you're just talking about parasites or pests that are just living in the same place, but they're not sharing function. So it uses a cow right here as an example that all of us can visualize. Cows are not capable of digesting grass themselves. It is the bacteria living in their stomachs doing the job, right? Which is why humans cannot digest grass, because we don't have that bacteria to do that. So, in other words, in the same way as the host cannot live without certain organs, it often cannot exist without its microbiota. Therefore, there is no reason to exclude the symbiotic bacteria from the definition of an individual. If the bacteria is performing the needs of the individual, then the bacteria is the individual. So there's also something amazing that they bring up, which is that if we are evolving, let's just take the evolutionary standpoint. If we are evolving through generations, right, through multiplication, through us mating, and then there's, the mutation theory, which is just a theory. I don't always take it. This is also happening within the bacteria of the body, and they are reproducing at a much faster rate, which means that because there's a shorter generation time of bacteria, they can reflect changes in the environment faster, which can provide quicker change to the host genome to evolve, which is crazy if you think about it. The bacteria inside of us is evolving to the environment, which is allowing us to evolve quicker than if we were just to wait for the next generation. Things like cold, hot temperature, right? Things like dis-ease we can evolve to respond to the environment quicker as a result of us being part bacteria. So we really have to redefine the concept of the individual. And the vast majority of the symbiotic bacteria dwells in our gut. Now, this functionality, right? What is this functionality that we're talking about? So the impact of the gut microbiota on the brain begins as early as the development of the brain itself. The microbiota is necessary for effective myelination of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain dealing with emotions, memory, or cognition. Moreover, the bacteria seem to contribute to synaptic growth and plasticity, and through the influence on brain development, also affect the progress of our motor control. On the other hand, brains of animals raised in sterile environments, which means no bacteria, no germs, animals raised in sterile environments lack this structural integrity. It lacks the integrity of cognition, emotions. So there is a link between gut bacteria and cognition in human infants, which means that the bacteria is necessary for the processing of our brain. There's more, though. Certain bacteria are known to improve object recognition and object discrimination, which is very important in pattern recognition, which is one of the key components that makes a human human. We can recognize patterns and how we fit into the patterns and how our behavior fit into the patterns. The bacteria is necessary. There's also studies that show that the consumption of probiotic cocktails alters the cognition of facial expressions of other people. We're actually able to recognize facial expressions better with these probiotic cocktails. There's something called irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS. It's a disorder typically associated with brain-gut microbiome access. And if we have that, this influences our cognition as well, which is why it's so important if we have gut stuff going on, like IBS, like Crohn's, like like in terms of what the effects of that is. We're talking about diarrhea, constipation, okay? Not going to the bathroom for days. Some people, the average American, I believe, poops every other day, okay? I know people that have gone a week or even 2 weeks being constipated. This is because the bacteria is messed up, and that's completely screwing up our concept of life, which is why I'm partnered with a company that has transformations that are guaranteed money back to transform people's life through diet. Okay, in order to have a functional diet, the diet needs to be nourishing the cells. It needs to be getting the garbage out of the body through detox, right? So we detox through the breath, we detox through the skin, we detox through the liver and kidneys as well. Those being functional is allowing us to get out the garbage. By garbage, I mean the stuff that we're breathing in through the air, right? Including whatever is being sprayed in the air, but pollution from cars, pollution from planes. We've got the spray in our food, okay? Glyphosate from Roundup, which is sprayed on our entire food supply. It's in rain. It's in 99% of mother's milk. It's in 63% of the ground tested. I believe 83% of the air tested, or maybe water tested. Rainwater, 83% of rainwater. And if that's not coming out of the body, then our diet's not functional, okay? And as well as the diet needs repair. We need components for repair. So in order to have a functional diet, no matter how you're eating, paleo, keto, high carb, low carb, vegan, whatever it is, if the diet is not nourishing, detoxifying, and repairing, we're not going to be functional human beings. Our bacteria is not going to be functional. Our entire perception of reality is going to be different. Remember all that Teflon you ate as a teenager in college on those cheap plates? Who knows? Maybe 90% of the restaurants also are using stuff like that, metal on metal, right? They're using metal spatulas with metal pots and pans. Every knife that you've ever used, why do you think it gets dull? Where do you think the sharp blade, those pieces of metal from that knife go? It goes into the food that it's cutting, and then we eat that food. All that heavy metals are going into the body. Parasites love to feed off of heavy metals. We got to get that out. That's why we call our main package the Ultimate Lifestyle Transformation, because it doesn't just fix the health. It doesn't just fix the gut. It supports with that, yes, but it also completely enhances your life as a result of what I'm about to read right now. So I just talked about improved object recognition, object discrimination, facial recognition, how irritable bowel syndrome influences our cognition. Some bacteria can even mediate pain perception. Pain perception is different depending on the bacteria. Gut microbiotic affects the process of learning and memory. And there's studies for all of this. It's listed in the paper right here. The gut microbiome shapes our emotional states. There's another study. Recent studies indicate the influence of microorganisms on the amygdala, which is the process of the brain that, from a traditional standpoint, process emotions. So the influence of microorganisms on the amygdala, which controls responses to stressful stimuli. Oh, it explains it right here. So there's studies that talk about how the microorganisms influence our stress. And I would even say anxiety goes into that. Some substances whose low levels are associated with the emergence of depression and anxiety are produced by the gut bacteria. I just keep on saying the same thing that the paper is about to say, probably because I've read it 3 times so far. So the emergence of depression and anxiety produced by gut bacteria. We can change our life if we can change our food supply for the better. So some of the chemicals that the body produces, like oxytocin, serotonin, produced in the gut, There's studies, well, it says right here, in the case of serotonin, 95% of it is stored in the gut and 5% belongs to the central nervous system. So serotonin, the research that I often quote is that 70% of serotonin is produced in the gut. The rest of it, guess where it's produced? The pineal gland. So we really have to take care of the gut. We have to also take care of the pineal gland. The pineal gland is dysregulated if we are exposed to artificial light, especially at nighttime, but even during the day, if we're never going out into the sun, the pineal gland is not processing correctly. Also, the pineal gland will become dysregulated if we're taking external fake melatonin, because the pineal gland does two primary things from a traditional scientific standpoint. The pineal gland makes serotonin. It also synthesizes melatonin when we go to sleep, which brings us into that deep, restful, regenerative state of being, which is another necessary thing to happen for health and for our consciousness, which is why we in that package I talked about, have something that helps the body stimulate its own melatonin in a natural, better than organic way. The gut bacteria affect social behavior as well. The microbiome's ability to shape, affect, and emotion therefore indicates that influence of bacteria may spill over into every aspect of what it means to be conscious, living organism. The communication is bi-directional, and therefore our emotional states have the same time and impact on the microbiome structure. Now it's talking about bidirectionality, not just from down to up, but from up to down. So there is going to be even a loop, right? If our microbiome is producing anxiety, and then our anxiety produces thoughts that are destructive, that's going to then influence the environment of the bacteria, and it's going to go into a snowball effect. Check this out. A single 2-hour exposure to a social stressor is enough to change the microbiota profile. A single 2-hour exposure. This is why we, meaning the community that probably if you're watching this, you are amongst, promote that our thoughts create reality. Our words create reality. This is now proving, according to Gallery et al. 2014, that a single 2-hour exposure of a social stressor is enough to change the microbiota profile. When the profile of our bacteria are changed, then that influences how we think, how we perceive, how we act, how we feel, which definitely influences the reality that we reside in. Goes into disorders like gut bacteria and Parkinson's disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, anorexia, alcoholism, schizophrenia, manic depression disorder, multiple sclerosis, chronic pain. In many cases, probiotics have been proven as an effective method of treatment. Back to what I was saying about the neurons in the brain and the neurons in the gut. 500 million neurons in the gut. 100 billion in the brain. That's a significant amount. 0.5% is significant. 0.5% one way or another, if that's controlling all of these mechanisms in the body and it is unhealthy, it's not just about the head brain. It's not just about our thoughts. We do have a significant part of us wrapped and intertwined into our gut. Now, this paper then goes into but are the bacteria conscious? Well, it goes into this multiply realizable, which is basically the concept that consciousness as we know it can show up in multiple states. And it's asking the questions, are these microorganisms conscious as well? And if they are, do they have an ability to influence our consciousness? Can our consciousness shift depending on how our bacteria are showing up? And then it goes into panpsychism, right? Which is like, are there multiple consciousnesses that are making up one entity? And then it also, he claims that he's not claiming this, but he does bring up, is the brain responsible for our consciousness? Is the brain responsible for our consciousness, or is it something else? In the spiritual community, there's this concept that the DNA is an antenna and we are actually downloading our consciousness from physical, within our physical vessels, which may be existing throughout all times and spaces. So our consciousness could actually be downloading into multiple physical vessels throughout this current time line or throughout other times, other realities. He's, just to be clear, he is not claiming that. He makes a statement that he does not claim that we or any other organism that belongs to the species which has developed the brain can be conscious without the brain. To say that would necessarily imply that there's an existence of the soul, which he does not aim to defend here. However, this is a paper that he's writing about a specific thing. Who knows what he actually knows or believes in this case? So, in conclusion, our consciousness is realized through the material structure constituted by the bidirectional communication between the brain and the gut microbiota. He has demonstrated that none of the components of the brain-gut microbiome axis is necessary for the mere existence of consciousness, and hence consciousness is multiply realizable. On the other hand, I have argued that all the components of the axis are necessary for the type of consciousness healthy humans have. Consequently, philosophers must take into account the whole brain-gut microbiome system in their studies, and they cannot focus solely on the brain as they did in the past. And that's the whole thing. Our science is changing. Our ability to perceive the world and how we analyze things are changing. We can no longer just cut up the human body and reduce it into single compartments and study them. We can't just talk about the brain as the seat of our consciousness because it's expanding, right? Our expansion of the mind is expanding throughout the entire body, including into other organisms. I would personally push it beyond this organism. I feel that the evolvement of self-evolution depends on our evolving concept of the nature of self. So we go from self is this physical thing into, this physical thing is made up of a bunch of different organisms, so I can accept that. I have the science right here to accept that. And then the next step, the next bridge from that is that we are a bunch of different organisms of a grander version of self. And We get access to that when we, just like this paper demonstrates, when we share in functionality, when we cooperate, when we are empathic, when we feel the emotions of others, when we're able to sense their perspective, whether we believe in it or not. But the ability to put on the goggles of another person and see the world, see reality through their window allows us access into the grander self, because we are merging with others. We are sharing functionality because their experience becomes our experience. And opening up to that aligns us physically, energetically, multidimensionally to the grander essence of our self. And that's why I'm constantly promoting alignment within self, because it's hard to align with others if we're not even aligned with ourself. Alignment of self looks like you're on purpose. You speak the words that are true to you. You relate with the people that resonate with you. Every day you are doing actions that resonate with your being. The opposite of that would be going to a job that you hate, having to do tasks during the day that you hate, having to do things, having to say things, having to learn things that don't feel right to you. That is you being inharmonious to self. If we can align ourself, click it into place so that we're thinking, acting, feeling in alignment, in harmony with self, then we can expand that out to others. And that's a whole process, being in alignment with self. It's a whole process that could take decades, it could take lifetimes for some. If we're able to do it with ourself, where we're on purpose, we're in sync, we're in harmony, now we can go expand out into the field. Just like it was a journey to find alignment within your physical boundary of your skin and your life, it's also going to be a journey to find alignment with, quote, others. It is possible, though, to see somebody who you once categorized as an enemy or another. It is possible to find harmony in there. There is harmony. The universe is harmonious. That's actually what the word universe, one song, a song is harmonious. There's ups and downs, there's spaces, there's highs and lows and gaps and intensities and drama that happens. Our concept of what good and bad is a perception. Go out into nature. You're going to see things eating each other, things raping each other, things taking over, fighting for territory, and that's all beautifully harmonious if you can expand out and view it from the wholeness of it. It's happening within our body as well. There's cells overtaking other cells that are weak, damaged, broken, diseased. We've got murder happening. We've got competition happening within our body. We stop drinking water right there alone. We've got competition for water. And there might even be water, H2O, being produced within our body. The point is, evolve the concept of self. Once you get into alignment within yourself, are you able to expand that self-conception? Because if you are granted the perspective of multiple. And the end, let's just say, even though it's not a goal, but let's just say the direction that you would be going would be termed the Godhead or the all-seeing eye or source, right? Which has the perspective of everything, of all of the entities, all happening throughout all times and all spaces. You would have that perspective if practiced, if going on the journey, if every situation that you're in, you're able to sense the feelings of others, the thoughts of others. Even if you're using technology, that's essentially what we're doing on social media, Instagram, YouTube. We're feeling others. We're liking, we're putting our heart into them. And we're learning. A scientist could be learning something on the other side of the world. We can be there live as he's learning. Find harmony.